There we go. Okay, right. So let's go into the PowerPoint. Okay, everybody. Right. So hopefully you can see my screen. Fantastic. Okay. So we're going to do a deep dive into writing skills. Okay. So it's really important that we're very clear about the standards, particularly, you know, working with level 1, level 2, students to be able to construct complex sentences consistently and accurately using paragraphs where appropriate, communicate information, ideas, and opinions clearly. And it's very important that we draw a distinction between ideas, opinions, and information, and for those to be done as clearly as possible. Organize writing for different purposes using appropriate format and structure. Convey clear meaning and establish cohesion using organizational markers effectively, and use different language and register in terms of persuasive techniques, supporting evidence, specialist words suited to the audience and purpose. Okay, now with that in mind, guys, I just wanted to ask you, just spend a couple of minutes just thinking about this and just writing a few comments in the chat box. What are the key challenges at level 1, level 2 in terms of the writing skills of students? What do they really struggle with? What is it exactly? Let's call a thing a thing. I think one of the things that we agreed on very early on in this course is that learners find writing skills probably the most challenging out of all three. From my experience of teaching English, I'd say mainstay, the majority of students find writing the most difficult. And I already spoke earlier about how me, for example, as an English teacher, I always like to interleave, okay, using interleaving, to interleave writing skills development right from day one, okay? Rather than saying, okay, term 1, speaking, listening, term 2, reading, term 3, writing. Now, for me personally, based on the challenges that learners have with writing, and it is a productive language skill, there's lots of tasks involved as opposed to little activities that learners need to do, a lot of writing tasks that they need to undertake for them to show that they're competent at level 1 and level 2. So tell me what the problems are. What are the issues? And let's call a thing, because the more I know about your issues that students have with writing, then I can best help you and support you. Okay, let's have a look. Right. Okay, so right, don't know where to put the full stop. Okay, right. So thank you, Shirley. Common problems with punctuation. I always find that I always try to get my learners to do lots of error correction. So sentences that do not have any punctuation always come to mind. And then for them to put their punctuation in. Joe, making it up. You mean the learners are short of ideas to create something, or what they're writing is not consistent with the task? Sorry, Joe, I hope you don't mind. If you wouldn't mind just clarifying that. Apostrophes, yes, apostrophes. And dare I ask the question, are our level 1, level 2 students using colons and semicolons? My favorite. Zabia, you're saying they get nervous. Yeah, because of spelling. Okay. I'd say, Zabia, any focus work on phonics, letter tiles, word building, which then could be funneled into sentences and text, would be quite helpful as well. SPAG. Okay, I'm going to show you a SPAG activity I developed for one of my other courses for complex sentences that hopefully you might find useful for functional skills. Developing their ideas sequentially, brilliant. Thank you, Dorette. We're going to go through signposting words in this session. You'll find that useful. Meeting all the things, the task, yeah, exactly. Basically, Natasha, it's the task realization is a problem. And sometimes students might need a bit of time to really understand what is the task asking me to do. What I like to do with my students is I always like them to represent the task as a flow chart. So the flow chart represents their direction of travel in their minds as to what they need to do first, second, third, and fourth. And sometimes, you know, I might put it as a 5-point plan. You know, you have to do this first, this second, blah, 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 blah. That's worth bearing in mind. Spelling is a problem. Thanks, Vicky. Yeah. Again, I like getting my students to do lots of error correction and even multiple choice with errors that they're asked to write the correct word. They give them different options and then they have to choose. Yeah, Natasha, writing enough, you know, maybe they're just, maybe it's the vocabulary. Maybe they just haven't got the vocabulary. And when I know that my students do not have the relevant, sufficient vocabulary to write the letter, I myself as a teacher, I'm actually a predictor as well. I will predict that they will need a pipeline of vocabulary, but I'll try to present it in such a way that I might say, right, you got 20 words here, but I reckon only 10 of them are relevant for your letter. Which ones do you think they are? So not only are they then reasoning between the words, but they're then selecting the words that can pipeline into their written word. That will hopefully give them more to write about. And what you might want to do is you may want to give them grammatically incorrect sentences and say to them, look, if you reorder them or you correct the tense, then you've got 3 or 4 complex sentences you can just put into your writing. That's it. Fantastic. And some other things. Let's have a look and see. Sorry, I've just lost my mouse contact there. Right, okay. Semicolons. Colons are a challenge. Yeah, fantastic. Again, you know, sentences which require either of them and for students to decide. Meaning making. You can write the meanings of each one, get them to match it with the punctuation mark. You could give them something unpunctuated and say, you've got to put a semicolon in between some three words here and a colon between those 3. Where do you think it exactly needs to go and why? So I would try to turn the punctuation to a little bit of a fact-finding exercise, and that will help them to use their subconscious mind a lot more. Okay, and that's really important. I believe that we could make, in the whole education sector, we could make the learners use their subconscious minds a lot more for them to be able to take on more challenging tasks, because we're allowing them time to think and logically process for them to be able to produce the goods in the end. The writing is illegible and they have to explain what they've written. Wow, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that, Kathleen, because again, it may well be that as a practice thing for them to be able to write more legibly, it could well be down to the choice of pen or the writing implement. Now I found, and I've done this for myself as well as helping students as well, if I find that my handwriting is beginning to decline with the biro, I just go back to pencil. Now again, I don't write any official documents, but it's just for me to get back into the habit of writing a bit more neatly, because the pencil forces you to press down harder than you would on a biro or some kind of an ink gel pen. So that might be a little hack there that might help. But ordinarily, what you might want to do there, Kathleen, is, you know, continually show students examples of good handwriting, and for them to be exposed to that. Or and maybe if it's appropriate, you may want to give them reproduce text which is using a handwriting font, but then you have it as italics and you grey shade it, so you don't have it as full black aligned, just have it as grey shaded, just to encourage the learners to write over it so they can just practice their handwriting, a different style of handwriting. It might help. Okay. Yeah, writing to be aligned in the margin. Sometimes the writing just veers off away from the margin. And again, that's just for them to be a little bit more, you know, kind of zoned in on using the margin and just trying to keep the margin there. Now, unwittingly, some of you might not agree with this, but I've done this a few times with my students for writing alignment. I get them to write on blank paper. I get some of my students write on blank paper, so then encouraging them to try to write in an aligned way and try to make your word curvy. Now that forces them to really focus on not just free writing, but just trying to keep it aligned. And if they can write, if they can do their writing on a blank piece of paper and it's pretty well aligned, chances are that when you give them line paper, that's going to help no end. They'll be relieved to see it. So that might help as well. So Natasha, you're saying you teach proofreading. Students are really resistant. They just want to put the pen down and be done. Okay, that's fine. What might be helpful, I don't know whether this might be helpful, but maybe if students could be encouraged to maybe use a speech-to-text app, and what they could do is they could just verbally convey their ideas, and then the app will then convert it into text, as long as they speak clearly and coherently. And then what they could do, they could take the text, and then they could then maybe rewrite the text in their own handwriting. At least some of it's been done for them by themselves. So that might be helpful. I think you might need to vary it, because for some students, just by virtue of just getting them to sit on a chair by a table with a paper and pen could just take them back to school. And if it wasn't positive, then, you know, it just takes them back to a part of their unconscious that they want to leave behind. And then it comes back when we prompt it in the conscious mind. So we might want to have a look at creative ways of trying to eventually get them to the pen and paper, but maybe use other things as well. Fantastic. Okay. You know, sometimes what I've done as well, I've given them examples, because I like to do these questions myself. I like to write the answers, and I like to use the answers as teaching material. For example, if I could give them a half-completed letter with missing information, then I want them to complete it. They see it more like a puzzle, but in the end, they actually then complete the whole task. And then they've got a model, and then I'll give them a similar question, which asks them to practice the same skill, but a different context. Okay? So a few tricks there that might help. Right, Josh, you're saying I use microtasks to reward things like phone games and apps. Brilliant, very good. And as Carol Dweck, famous New York researcher, said, that praise wisely, get them to do things in steps, you know, on a path to mastery. And then because you take them on a path to mastery, step by step by step, you're using assessment for learning techniques to check in on them. And then also you're praising them as well on the interim stages, not just the final product. That's so important for writing, that I know that it's product orientated, it is task orientated, it's completion orientated, but there are many, many steps for learners to follow to get to that letter, to get to that email, to get to that article. And there's lots of opportunities for incremental mastery work, which will then lend itself into praising wisely as well. Lots of them hate peer proofreading. They feel uncomfortable even in a friendly class. Okay, that's fine. If they feel uncomfortable, it's about trying to maybe get them to see the value of it. Maybe just to have a little bit of a stop, a bit of a kind of a pit stop really, and just have a little talk about it and say, I know you're finding it a bit challenging, but do you know the benefits are? How about giving it another go? Or is there another way that I could help you to try to, you know, proofread? It's just a way of, or any other way that you can think of that actually helps you to error correct. And sometimes the learners can come up with some brilliant ideas. You know, do we ever ask our learners for ideas on how we can actually, you know, they can be doing things rather than them accepting one way all the time? They may well, I've learned lots of ideas from my students, lots and lots, because I've opened up a discussion with them. So that might be helpful as well. And these kind of things can come out in tutorial as well on a more one-to-one basis. So does anyone teach handwriting? Fantastic. Now, for me personally, I know with functional skills examiners, because I've been on the other end as an examiner for functional skills, and the worst thing you can have is, you know, illegible handwriting, and which takes away the meaning. That's the thing. If the handwriting takes away the meaning and the intention behind the question, then they unwittingly lose mark, because the examiner can't fathom it out. So it may well be an investment to be able to do some handwriting teaching as well. And I dare say that schools do this really well, okay? And it may well mean that you might have to delve. I mean, do any of you go in the TES? Timed Educational Supplement Resources? Anybody use that? Anybody use Teach It? Anybody use One Stop English? British Council has some good stuff on handwriting. So if you need to get back into handwriting to improve their presentation, then that's going to be valuable, highly valuable. The last thing you want is all the fantastic work you are doing, the students are doing, and the examiner can't read it, then this is a problem, okay? Yeah, how they hold their pen. That's a big, I mean, I think there are some bendy pens. I've seen them in WH Smith. There are some pens that are bended in a certain way that it can just improve the grip, and it could be the grip that might be doing it, okay? So that's really, really important. I mean, for me personally, I always find that my handwriting is a lot more neater when I use ink gel pens as opposed to the standard Bic pens, the biros. So that might be something that you just might, it's little things like that we should not take for granted. Really, really important. It's almost like you have a separate Maslow hierarchy of needs for writing. You know, get the pen right, get the paper right, the basics. It really does, it could make a huge difference, huge difference. And again, there's no harm if you're in a classroom, rather than getting students to always write sitting down, get them to write standing up, do a round robin around the table, or to write on flip charts as they travel around the classroom. Things like that can make a big difference. And trying different pens, different colors, it could all do it could all, you know, it could really help, okay? Okay, fantastic. Anything else? Shirley said, I recently sent the sheets to my Arabic speakers. They said they really helped them. Handwriting sheets, yeah, brilliant. I think ESOL learners will really appreciate it, but also there's no harm if you can, if any handwriting resource need adapting, then that might be something that you might want to do. What I've done with some of my students with handwriting is, if they've been able to produce the letter in the textual format using Word, I will cleverly change the font to a nice handwriting font, okay? And then I will then, again, shade the text in a gray color, and I will enlarge it on about 14 or size 16. Then I'll just encourage them to write over the gray kind of letters, so they can just practice writing in a more controlled way. And also, it may well mean that, you know, maybe because they've not, I'm not trying to be funny here, but if they've not done that much writing, okay, if they're not avid writers, if they haven't done that much writing, because writing also requires them to use lots of muscles around their fingers and their hands, okay? And if they're not normally dexterous with their hands in any shape or form, particularly with writing, then even the fact of holding a pen and pressing it, it could well cause them a little bit of physical stress, because they're not used to it. Okay, so it's things like that that can really just help them to get into a habit, get them into a certain mode, and then hopefully then things will flow from there. Okay, but I think with writing, we cannot ignore the basics. Okay, guys, all right, well, thank you for that. That's amazing. Okay, now, could you please tell me what you think about grammar? Okay, whether it's about learning grammar yourself, or whether it's about teaching grammar or the grammar of your students, let's talk grammar, my favorite subject in English language teaching. Tell me how you really feel, how your students really feel. We should have, would have, could have. Well, Joe, you know all your modal verbs there. Well done. Fantastic. Okay, so it's one of them things that we can't ignore, but it's things that we could easily want to ignore. And one of the things that really occurred to me, and this was a very, you know, that quadrant diagram that I showed you in the beginning, the one about code breaking and meaning making and text analysis and whatever. And basically, before I started to train as an English teacher in EFL, before I did my Delta, about 21 years ago, when my first 2 years of teaching English, I hardly looked at grammar. I didn't really see the point of it, because I wasn't taught grammar formally at school. It wasn't, you know, that in the 80s. I mean, the grammar translation approaches within the English education system, they were mostly in the 50s and the 60s. But then in the 70s and 80s, you had more communicative approaches where the teachers didn't necessarily look at this meta language and all these terms like past simple or present perfect, okay? But obviously it's come back now, hasn't it, in some shape or form in schools and now in colleges. So grammar is here, whether we like it or not. But I remember when I was training, I couldn't believe, for me personally, how much grammar I needed to learn and how much grammar I need to teach my students to really help them to motorize their skills, particularly the productive language skills for writing and speaking, okay? That if they had a better understanding of the English syntax, how the subject, verb, object works, and then how it can all be in, how, you know, the syntax can be inflected with the use of additional things like adverbs to provide more information about the verb, the action, or to be able to add more description with adjectives, to be able to talk about external, internal obligation, and also levels of certainty using modal verbs like should, could, might, have to, must, etc., 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 just to make the writing more sophisticated, and also to use lots of signpost words or linker words or cohesive discourse markers, like things like on the other hand, although, if, as complex sentences. All these things I did not have hardly any understanding of from a technical point of view until I did my Delta course. And that's when I had the awakening. Right, I now know what English teaching is all about. So I have my own views on it. I am a big, big fan of teaching grammar and incorporating it in such a way that is beneficial for my students and doesn't disengage them or disempower them. But obviously with the functional skills, even from level 1, students do need to have some handle of meta-language, the terms that are used to describe the English language. But it's really important. So let's have a look at some feedback here from colleagues. Right, okay. I didn't do much grammar in school. Yeah, same with me, Paula. I think we're the same generation. It's only when I learnt it 21 years ago that I then, you know, really sort of had a better understanding of it. Didn't do any in the 90s. Thank you, Josh. Yes, EFL student books. Brilliant comment there, Tariq. Grammar information. And I think I think when I trained early on in my early days, I was reliant on these EFL student books, and also the Cambridge exam series, the Cambridge First Certificate, Cambridge Advanced English, Cambridge Proficiency. If some of you want to have a crash course in grammar, if you can do some of the use of English papers yourselves for the Cambridge exams, either the First Certificate, Advanced, or the Proficiency, then you will learn a lot about grammar. Can I also mention, guys, as well, did I send you a link to the Foundation Learning, online learning platform where you can access the English modules? Yes, there's one on grammar. So that one takes you more into, now this is where, I mean, the reason why the Education Foundation developed that site is so as to allow colleagues in their own time to develop their own personal skills and understanding of things like grammar, okay? Grammar or reading skills or whatever it might be. So other things as well, whereby, for example, use EFL student books. Yeah, very good, excellent. I'm just thinking of a red book I used to use all the time. I can't remember now, Tariq. The name will come back. It's a red book and it was in different levels and it was brilliant for grammar, brilliant. I can't remember the name now, but I used it for years. Anyway, didn't do much in the 60s. Never mind, that's fine, Kathleen, because, you know, that's fine. I know I was going to say something, guys. The independent schools, because I work in lots of independent schools, they have always, they've almost retained the grammar translation approaches of the 50s and 60s, and they teach hardcore grammar in their English classes, as well as reading aloud, all the things that sometimes are not commonplace in state education, but these are things that are worth trying in our classes, okay? Yeah, CFBT, all right, okay. Yeah, the Centre for British Teachers, brilliant stuff, yeah. Shirley, I drowned in grammar, but allowed me to self-teach Greek. Right, so that was the key then. Brilliant, fantastic. So you all may have your own thoughts and views and experiences about this. And what I would say to all my colleagues really is that just obviously look at how the language, the sentences are formed that will enable students to complete their functional skills tasks, their exams, to a good standard, and for you to then start looking at those sentences and then what kind of language work do you think you might need to do, grammar practice work, that's going to help your learners to get to that standard, okay? And I will go through some various examples of activities that you could do, which don't necessarily require you to have the underpinning knowledge or for you to teach it explicitly, if that makes sense, okay? I mean, when I was teaching during my Delta days, I mean, we had to demonstrate that we could teach grammar to international students because the international students wanted us to talk about different tenses and different modal verbs and proportionate certainty and whatnot, and whatever it was, we had to do it. But we're not talking about that in functional skills. We want students to be able to improve their language skills, but also then their knowledge of language in a more authentic, in a more functional way that will serve their purposes. But there's one big disadvantage of, say, for example, if learners have been taught overly in an overly grammatical way, the problem with that is that they lose out on fluency at the expense of accuracy. As English teachers, we always have to weigh up to what extent, if we're doing lots of fluency work, are we doing enough on the accuracy? If we're doing more accuracy work, are we necessarily taking away from fluency? So I'd always try and say, keep the balance, okay? Really important. And also the second thing is, if say ESOL students are just hungry for more grammar because they're expecting you to teach that, it's very important that we pivot that. And because it's so important for the students not to know that, to know that you don't just learn English by learning rules, because in the English language, there are more exceptions than rules. And it's the art of learning the exception than the rules that really get you to native speaker proficiency. And so, you know, this gives the ESOL student an opportunity to learn about fluency issues, talk about cohesion, talk about, you know, how to be communicative and free-flowing and spontaneous rather than pre-planned and preloaded and overly patterned, okay? So this is something that, and again, you know, I love getting my ESOL students to listen to people using different dialects and different accents, you know, different ways of using the English language in different parts of the country, because that is the real use of English. So it's really important. And so, you know, not to think that learners, that they have to be all geared up towards the Queen's English or use the received pronunciation, which is the accent of standard English. We're not trying to do that. It's important to give them variety and then to get the right balance with accuracy and also between accuracy and fluency. So, I mean, the only knowledge of grammar that's relevant is knowledge that improves the skills. And that's what I've said before. Whatever that can improve their skills from where they are now to where they need to get to, that is the main thing, okay? Use high quality talk to underpin reading and writing and rehearse ideas. Very, very, very important. Now it's saying here, particular benefits boys. So again, there has been in schools particularly, lots of research done on boys learning, okay? Because they say that for some, you know, for a variety of reasons, that boys are not as linguistically up there compared to their counterparts in terms of girls of the same age, that the girls tend to be more confident linguistically, okay? And there's been lots of research about this, and also schools have various initiatives on encouraging the writing skills of boys. I mean, I've delivered training courses for schools, you know, specifically on teaching boys writing skills, okay? So that's the reason why we've mentioned it there, all right? So it's worth thinking about, you know, where, you know, these kind of things when you're planning your lessons. Emphasize thinking and decision making and also editing as well. That's really important. Again, making sure that they're using their subconscious mind, planning, making sure it's all thought through properly, and use language examples to talk about grammar rather than teaching grammar point in isolation. That's so important. If you do have to mention a meta language, do it within the context of a discussion, a task, so then they get a 2-for-1 deal. So important. Okay, guys, right. Now, have a little look at this text, okay? Because this is something that a learner has written. I mean, I'll read it out. I want to ask you for a couple of minutes is, how can we make this, how can we teach the student to make the writing more interesting? Okay, here we go. I like going shopping at the weekend. I go with my daughters. They like it too. They always want to go to Topshop. They have student discount. I hate Topshop. The clothes are getting smaller. I am getting bigger. I am getting old. There is nowhere for me to sit while I wait for them. They have redesigned the shop. They have taken the seats out. After Topshop, the girls always want to go for coffee. They get the biggest ones, the ones with the frothy tops, a bit like they just bought in Topshop. I always have to pay. They never buy me anything. I come home with nothing. They have 3 bags of shopping each. Oh dear. Oh my goodness me. Okay then, right. So guys, one of your students writes this, right? Okay, as a writing task you've given them about, you know, what did you do at the weekend or something like that. So tell me then, how could we encourage the student make their writing more interesting? Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Zabia. Add conjunctions. Yeah. Yeah, Ross, fricative devices, more emotives. Definitely, because that will really extend their writing. Okay. Paragraphs, dialogues. Yeah, it's not segmented at all, is it? Yeah, yeah, relative pronouns. Exactly. Yeah, brilliant. You know, are they using that? Are they using which? Because that will help them to split things up. Anything else comes to mind? Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, read it out, because when I read it out, it must have sounded a bit humorous and short, maybe very short. So again, students can also pick up on some of the vibes there in terms of how you read it as well. That could be really good. And what you could also do as well, I don't know whether you do you do much listening comprehension with your students? I know for EFL exams, they have to do a listening comprehension. They have a stimulus and then a response task for listening, but we don't do that for functional skills. But is that something that you've done with your own students? Have you done listening comprehension? They have to listen very carefully. Yeah, good point. Because if it switches them off, then again, it's going to switch off an examiner. I totally agree. Get them to write to sound stimuli, but no comprehensions. Good. From a YouTube video, but not through exposition. That's great, Josh. Brilliant. Really good comments there. Excellent. Okay. All right. And maybe from, yeah, okay, we got that down. Brilliant. Fantastic. Okay. All right. So just to talk a little bit about how we can go about teaching language in creative ways that can actually help our students. Now, this is it definitely it's a kind of a take on the London Underground, but using discourse markers. So you know how we have the Northern Line, we have the Central Line, we have the Metropolitan Line, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So learners should be able to make a connection between London when they're looking at something like this. But then when you look at the description of the lines, that the yellow one is a contrasting line. I think probably in the London one is a Bakerloo line, correct me if I'm wrong. Then you've got the central line, or the comparing line, is red. Adding line is green. Emphasizing line is blue. Sequencing line is black. And example line is in pink, okay? So it all depends on, based on the writing task they've been given, which line or which lines do they need to follow? And these are words like whereas, alternatively, nevertheless, significantly, importantly. Now, let me ask you a question. You know all these words, all of them, do you think they are high frequency usage or low frequency usage for your students who are doing writing functional skills, level 1, level 2? Fair point, Shirley, about the color. You may need to redo it with different shadings. That's not going to put off people. So yes, it may not work for some, but it may work for others. That's a good point. So tell me then, do your students use words like subsequently, illustrated by, similarly? Do they show contrasting, comparing, adding, emphasizing, sequencing in these ways or not? Okay. Now, if they did start to use them, what impact would it have on their writing skills, their writing confidence, and the examiner marks? Yeah. Yeah, but they don't use them. That's fantastic. That's great, Shirley. They use them in speech, which is brilliant. Because speaking and writing, they're both productive skills, there's a lot of transferability. So if they're saying it, we can say, well, remember you said the word although, Jane. Think about using it in your writing. And it's you can write it as a complex sentence too. So do you think if you're saying to me that your learners are not using most of these words in their writing or hardly any, will it make a difference to their writing skills and then the marks on the functional skills if they did? Yes, definitely. It'll make them, this is all about fluency. Yeah, definitely. This is about giving them fluency training because they'll be able to then have more connective tissue in the use of the language, and they'll be able to flow a lot more. And they'll be able to say more. So contrasting will give them lots of varying points of view, and comparing as well. Adding, they're going to be adding on information. So they're going to be drawing more on their subconscious mind to be thinking of different things. Okay. Absolutely. And if you know, the more we can teach this to our students, okay, the more we teach it to our students, then there's more, and the more that we use it as teachers, the more we encourage them to use it. And then if it enters their verbal discourse, then we want these words, these discourse markers, these cohesive devices, we want them to also to transcend into their speaking, for their presentations, for the discussions, as part of their level 1, level 2 speaking and listening component, okay? But one word of warning here, guys, because, you know, if students are not in the habit, if it's not part of their language culture to be using such words, but we know is beneficial for them, then we may have to plan some teaching around this so that we give them the pipeline of language. Now, for me personally, this is where I enjoy teaching all levels of English, but this is what makes me really love teaching English at the higher levels, is when I can get my teeth into teaching language like this that my learners haven't got, but I know it's going to benefit them exponentially. Okay? Right, Josh, you're saying my inner nerd pines for some sort of debate society club where this... Oh, Josh, you need to hire me. I want to work with you. I am a massive fan of anything to do with debating, getting those extended discussions going, because that encourages people to really extend and push themselves. And when I go to these independent schools and then I go and do their ESB exams and I hear wonderful presentations, and then the teacher said their written work is marvelous and how the two intermesh together, then this is what, you know, I want us in Post 16 to consider how we can do this in a more rigorous way that's going to definitely benefit the students. But anything like that, Josh, where we're encouraging like speak easy clubs, and as I mentioned to you before, the other hat that I wear is around life coaching and looking at mental health issues and emotional well-being, and obviously there are the 8 national principles for schools and colleges to make sure that the mental health and the emotional well-being of all learners is safeguarded and mental health is promoted as a form of health. And so there's one principle which is around the learner voice. So if there's anything around mental health or emotional well-being around where learners can talk and speak easily, then maybe that might be another avenue to go down, where learners can then, because this kind of language might be very helpful for them to express what might be going on inside their heads. if they are expressing some personal difficulties, but they just don't have the language to express it fully, okay? And so that's something that could be intertwined together, okay? It's really important. Fantastic. Shirley says, I try and teach this through model answers, but also provide sheets from their folders with these discourse markers. Brilliant stuff. What I've done with my students is I've told them, right, here are all your words, right? They're all here. And some of them, and then I'd give them this tube map without the words, and I'll probably do it as an A3 poster. And then I would say, right, this is the contrasting line, blah, blah. You pick out the words that are to do with contrasting, you put them on the yellow line. Anything to do with adding, on the green line. And they're working as a group, they're working together, okay? You could, in terms of differentiation, give them a few clues, like say, okay, you've only got 6 of them for contrasting, but 5 for adding, okay? Or you may want to give further clues, okay? So you may want to say, well, on this line, all of them end in ly or something like that, okay? So it all depends on the actual content. But you could use this in different ways. I just want to show you something else as well, guys. If I can just come out of there, then I can start showing you some other resources that might be helpful. Yeah, okay. Right, guys, can you all see this? Because I'm just a bit wary of screen sharing, especially what happened last time. Okay, I'm taking that as a yes, okay. Okay, guys, I don't know whether you use any kinesthetic prompts for learners to handle, for them to get a grip of some SPAG issues. Yes, no, maybe not? Okay, all right. So these are nets, basically. They're cutaways. And when you cut them up, you can then create like a little pyramid. And then, if, for example, for conjunctions, learners will then know that if they chose the top end words on the top of the apex, then they're okay, they're all right. But if you want to be really impressive, then you have to work your way down the triangle. Now, if you were teaching digitally, what you could do, obviously, they can't cut it, they can't fix it up, they can't handle it, fine, it's okay. As a visual, then what you could do, you could crop this PDF and just cut out the triangles, okay? And then you can then just reposition them and then just have the 2 triangles either side, okay? So you have the okay impressive triangle, and then you have the example of all the words, okay? Now, here, you're giving students the choice. You're giving them the choice to choose. And obviously, you want them to go more in the impressive, but students need to feel comfortable. They may never use evidently in speech, so why should they use it in their writing? So, you know, these kind of things, but then again, you may want to encourage them to use it, okay? You're not seeing it. Right, okay, right, let me just try again. Okay, sorry. Right, can you see it now? Is that better? Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, right, I'll start again. Okay, so basically, the point I'm making here, just going on from the underground exercise, just different innovative ways of trying to get the language across to students, so for it to make some connection, for it to stick, so they have more language choices available for their writing and their speaking as well. So here, with this cutaway, this net, that if you cut it up, glued it, it'll become a pyramid. And so basically, and again, you're giving students a choice that if their writing is going to be okay and satisfactory, then the top words, you know, just use the basic conjunctions, but then they can use more sophisticated words to maybe create some complex sentences for them to be able to, you know, show a bit more ambition, show a bit more depth in their writing. And also, the further down they go, they can also fully express their sentiment, because what is can be very frustrating for students is they've got all these ideas and they've got the inner drive and sentiment, but they don't have the language to be able to use it. But what I find very helpful is that if I can give them a choice and a range of words, And obviously I'm trying to encourage them to use the, you know, the ones on the bottom rung of the pyramid. Then hopefully then they'll be able to then, you know, see for themselves the power of language and how it can help them to write clearly, to write, you know, more, you know, in a more cohesive way, improve their fluency by choosing the right words. Okay, so you've got that. And there's another one here for punctuation on a similar lines. Okay, again, the top one is full stop, number one, level one. Then it goes to full stop, question mark, and then you add the comma, and then you got exclamation. Then you got things like ellipsis, and then you got quotation marks, speech marks, and then you got my favorite in the whole world, semicolon, brackets. Okay, and again, so the further down you go, then the more sophisticated it gets. Okay, but then again, the more sophistication, the better for the learners, and the better for their marks, and the better for their expression, and also how they present information, because colons and semicolons will help to extend their writing. It'll help them to extend what they actually mean to say. So again, you could use this as a punctuation pyramid and have it on the desks, and they make their own choices. And as you're going round robin, you could be pointing them in a direction where, have you thought about using the next layer down? What do you think? Has anybody used these before, seen them before? Any comments? Like them? Yes, good. Okay, fantastic. Okay, lovely. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to find a SPAG Functional Skills Level 1 complex sentence document I've written recently. So just bear with me while I find it.